Picture this. A mum is in a cafe with her 10-month-old baby. She steps up to the counter for a coffee, out of sight for about 90 seconds. Her baby freezes, then cries hard. She comes back, picks him up, and within about 15 seconds, he's calm again, babbling and reaching for a toy. To other people in the cafe, this might not look like a big reaction. But to a child's psychotherapist, this is a perfect, everyday example of one of the most well-proven ideas in child development. Welcome back to Don't Get a Therapist Yet. This is the show where we take real research from psychologists, doctors, psychotherapists, and child development experts. We cut out the jargon and turn it into something you can actually use. So, hi, I'm your host, Wendy Castelino. Today we're spending our 30 minutes on a huge topic in early child development. We'll look at how a baby forms a secure attachment to their caregiver. We'll look at what the research says, what can go wrong, and most importantly, we'll look at what any parent, grandparent, foster carer, adopted parent, or early years worker can do about it. Starting today, here's what we'll cover. First of all, a simple explanation of the research behind attachment, Bowlby, Ainsworth, and what attachment theory really says, because there's a lot of myth about this topic online. Next, we're going to cover 5 things the research shows genuinely help build a secure attachment. After that, the harder part, 7 research-backed reasons a baby might develop an anxious or an insecure attachment. And this is not to make anyone feel guilty, but because naming these things early is what helps us to fix them. And then we'll finish with 6 simple, practical tips you can use with a baby today, whether they're 2 weeks old or 2 years old. Just one quick note before we start. This episode is for learning. It's not for diagnosing anyone. It isn't a replacement for professional help. If anything here worries you about your own well-being or your baby's development or your bond with your baby, please speak to a health visitor, your GP, or a perimental mental health service. We'll mention this again at the end. So, what is secure attachment? Research made simple. Let's start with the basics, because it's hard to understand any tip or technique without understanding the theory behind it. So attachment theory comes from a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby, who did his main work in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Bowlby wrote 3 famous books called Attachment and Loss. His big idea was simple but powerful for its time. Babies are born wired to seek closeness to a caregiver whenever they feel upset, scared, hungry, or unsure. Bowlby called that caregiver a secure base, someone the baby can explore the world from and a safe haven, someone the baby can return to for comfort. And it's really important to stress that both of these parts matter. Without a safe haven, a child can't explore freely. Without a secure base to explore from, a child can't build confidence and curiosity. The scientist who turned Bowlby's idea into real, testable research, her name was Mary Ainsworth. So in the 1970s, she designed a well-known study called the strange situation. So here's how it works. A caregiver and baby play together in an unfamiliar room. A stranger comes in. The caregiver briefly leaves and then comes back. Researchers don't focus on the separation itself. They focus on exactly how the baby acts when the caregiver returns. That one moment turned out to say a lot. From it, Ainsworth described what we now call attachment styles. In secure attachment, the baby is upset by the separation, but is easily calmed once the caregiver is back and returns to play. In avoidant attachment, the baby shows little visible upset and seems to ignore the caregiver coming back. In ambivalent attachment, sometimes called resistant attachment, the baby is very upset and can't settle down even once the caregiver is back. They want comfort and then they push it away. Years later, researchers Mary Main and Judith Solomon looked again at these recordings. They found a fourth pattern: disorganized attachment. Here, the baby acts confused, afraid, or frozen around the very person who is supposed to make them feel safe. So why does a study from the 1970s still matter so much today? It's because how secure a baby feels is one of the strongest, most consistent predictors we have in child development research. Long-term studies link a baby's early attachment pattern to several things later in life. This includes how well they manage their feelings, how their body handles stress, including their stress hormone, which is called cortisol, how well they get along with other children, and their risk of anxiety and other difficulties well into the teenage years and adulthood. Researchers say a baby builds a kind of mental picture from these early experiences called an internal working model. In plain terms, it's the baby's unconscious answer to the question, if I need someone, will they be there for me? And am I worth caring for? That mental picture doesn't stay stuck in babyhood. It quietly shapes friendships, adult relationships, and even how we're going on to parent our own children. Before we move on, I just want to clear up a common myth. The phrase attachment parenting gets used a lot online, but it doesn't quite mean what the research says. Attachment parenting, as a named movement, usually focuses on specific habits: co-sleeping, longer breastfeeding, or carrying your baby in a sling. None of these things are bad, and some genuinely help build closeness. But the actual research on secure attachment is much broader and honestly more forgiving than the brand suggests. Security isn't about one special technique. It's about a caregiver's overall pattern of warm, steady, sensitive responses, what researchers call sensitive responsiveness, shown around thousands of small, everyday moments, not one checklist of rituals. And here's the encouraging part. Attachment security is not fixed by genetics, and it's not about being a perfect parent. It's a pattern of responding that anyone can learn. So let's look at what research says actually builds it. Now, there's a large body of research, including major studies and reviews, looking at what actually helps build secure attachment. Here are 5 approaches with real, repeated research support for building infant mental health and a secure bond. Video feedback, filming and coaching parents. This is one of the most tested attachment methods in child development research. It's sometimes called the VIP-SD for short. Here's how it works. A trained practitioner films a short, ordinary moment between caregiver and baby, feeding, playing, or a nappy change. They then sit down with the caregiver and watch the footage together, pointing out the exact moments where the caregiver read the baby's cues well and responded warmly. Studies show this simple method, focused just on the caregiver's everyday actions, is one of the most effective attachment tools we have. It works better, in fact, than longer programs that spend more time talking about a caregiver's own childhood. In short, showing someone the exact moment they got it right seems to help more than months of talking about why. Circle of Security, a simple guide for parents. A circle of security is a structured program often taught in small groups over about 8 to 20 weeks. It's built around a simple picture, a circle, that shows a secure base and safe haven idea, just what we talked about. It teaches caregivers to notice in the moment when their baby needs space to explore, and then when they need to come back for comfort. At its heart, this program helps caregivers build something researchers called reflective functioning. Simply put, the ability to think about what your baby might be feeling rather than just reacting to their behaviour. Studies, including work with mothers facing serious mental health struggles, show real improvements in both caregiver understanding and the child's attachment security. Kangaroo care, skin-to-skin contact. Kangaroo care started in the 1970s as a way to help premature and small babies in hospital. It simply means holding your baby skin to skin, upright against your bare chest. This has some of the strongest research behind it on this whole list. Studies link regular skin-to-skin contact to several benefits: a steadier heart rate and breathing in the baby, better temperature control, lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, and more of the bonding hormone oxytocin in both baby and caregiver. It's now recommended for healthy, full-term babies too, not just premature ones, because it's such a simple, free, and powerful way to build an early bond. Serve and return, simple back and forth moments. This idea and the name itself comes from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. Their research describes healthy early interaction like a game of tennis. The baby serves with a coo, a babble, a reach, or a cry. The caregiver returns the serve with eye contact, words, touch, or a matching facial expression. This is not just a nice extra. Research shows these small back and forth moments actually help build the baby's brain, strengthening the connections that support talking, communicating, and managing feelings. Programs that coach caregivers to notice and respond to those everyday moments consistently lead to warmer, more responsive caregiving and stronger attachment. Extra support for parents under stress. Some families deal with extra strain. This might be a parent's depression or anxiety, past trauma, substance abuse, or an unstable home life. For these families, getting proper support is itself one of the most powerful things you can do for your baby's attachment. In the UK, this kind of help is expanding through the NHS, with more perinatal and parent-infant mental health services becoming available. These services work directly with the caregiver's own well-being and their ability to understand their baby's feelings. The research is clear. Supporting the caregiver is one of the most reliable ways to support the baby. One more useful finding from the research before we move on. Shorter programs tend to work best. The most helpful ones focus directly on everyday caregiving behaviour and start after the baby is around 6 months old. In this field, less is often more, and programs that involve fathers or co-parents, not just the main caregiver, tend to work even better. So we're now going to move on to 7 causes of insecure or anxious attachment. Now let's talk about the harder part. What does the research say actually gets in the way of secure attachment and can lead to an anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment style? I want to say this clearly, and I'll keep saying it. None of this is about blaming caregivers. Almost all of these causes are about circumstances and support, not about love or good intentions. Naming them clearly is what allows for early, kind, and effective help, not shame. Not responding the same way every time. Ainsworth research found something important. Babies with an insecure attachment usually had caregivers who were often unavailable or distracted when the baby was upset. Over time, the baby learned a different way of coping. Some babies hide their needs. This is the avoidant pattern. Others make their distress bigger. This is the ambivalent pattern. Either way, the baby stops trusting that comfort will reliably come. In real life, this often looks less dramatic than it sounds. It might be a caregiver who's warm and present on good days, but overwhelmed or distracted on hard days with no clear pattern the baby can predict. It's the unpredictability itself, more than any single tough day, that the research flags as a real risk. Parents struggling with depression or anxiety. Depression and anxiety during pregnancy and after birth are among the most well-proven risk factors in this whole field of research. Depression during this time makes it harder for a caregiver to respond warmly and consistently. This isn't about lack of love. Depression itself makes it harder to notice and respond to a baby's small cues in the moment. And this is exactly why checking for postnatal depression matters so much and why it should be treated as a child development issue, not only a parent's health issue. Treating the depression is very often the fastest way to help the caregiver feel able to respond warmly again. A caregiver who feels scary to the baby. This is the exact mechanism researchers Mary Main and Eric Hess found behind disorganized attachment. Sometimes the person a baby naturally turns to for safety is also a source of fear. This can happen because of unresolved trauma, sudden anger, or frightening reactions of their own. When that happens, the baby is stuck with no good option. They can't move safely towards the caregiver, and they can't safely move away either. Researchers sometimes call this fear without a solution. There's no coping strategy that fixes it. That's part of why disorganized attachment carries the highest long-term risk of the 4 patterns, and why these families need specialist, trauma-informed support rather than general parenting advice. Neglect. When a baby's needs are ignored. Ongoing emotional neglect, where a baby's cues are regularly missed or ignored over time, is strongly linked into the research to insecure and disorganized attachment. It's seen as one of the clearest, best proven risk factors for later problems with anxiety and mood. Neglect doesn't need to involve unkindness to cause harm. A caregiver who is physically there but emotionally checked out, maybe because of their own untreated struggles, can create the same risk as active rejection. That's part of why early support services look for emotional availability, not just physical care. abuse and childhood trauma. The research is very clear here. Physical, emotional, or sexual abuse strongly disrupts attachment and a baby's emotional development. Abuse sits alongside neglect as one of the most adverse childhood experiences, often shortened to ACE, with the strongest known links to insecure and disorganized attachment and to mental health risks that can last a lifetime. This research was first done in the well-known Kaiser CDC studies, and it's been repeated many times since. This is part of why spotting these early experiences matters so much. Offering trauma-informed family support is now treated as a public health priority, not only a child protection issue. Ongoing stress at home, poverty, domestic violence, substance misuse, and isolation don't just add extra pressure in the background. Research shows that they directly reduce how much warmth and attention a caregiver has left to give. They're also linked to unhealthy stress hormone patterns in both caregiver and baby. That can make it even harder for the two of them to calm each other down. Researchers sometimes call this toxic stress, the idea that it's not hardship alone that causes lasting harm, but long-term stress without a calm, steady adult there to help buffer it. Big separations or changes in who cares for the baby. Bowlby's earliest work was based on watching children who were separated from their caregivers. This happened through long hospital stays, extended time in a neonatal unit, or frequent changes of who was looking after them, something that can happen in some fostering situations. Research consistently shows that a broken thread of care is a real, well-documented risk factor for insecure attachment, especially without one steady substitute caregiver stepping in. This is also why, in adoption and fostering research, having one steady person stay involved during any handover is now seen as best practice. Continuity itself seems to protect the baby, even when the actual caregiver has to change. One important thing worth pausing on: insecure attachment is genuinely common. Studies suggest somewhere between a third and 40% of babies in general populations show some kind of insecure attachment pattern. That's not a rare or unusual outcome, it's a widespread everyday reality. And just as important, it isn't permanent. Attachment patterns can change and improve throughout childhood, especially with the kind of research-backed support we covered earlier. So, quick recap before our last section. We've covered the theory, Bowlby's secure base and safe haven, and Ainsworth's strange situation and attachment styles. We've covered 5 research-backed ways to build secure attachment: video feedback, circle of security, kangaroo care, serve and return, and extra support for parents under stress. And we've covered 7 real causes of anxious or insecure attachment. Now, the part most of you have probably been waiting for: what do you actually do day to day starting tonight? 6 simple tips to build a secure attachment. Here are 6 things that any caregiver, parent, grandparent, foster carer, adoptive parent, or early years worker can start doing today. Every one of these comes straight from research we've just gone through. Play the serve and return game every day. Note your baby's serve: a babble, a look, a pointed figure, a reach, and return it with eye contact, words, or touch. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child calls this the most important everyday habit for building a healthy brain. The best part is that it costs nothing and takes seconds. A simple way to practice during nappy changes or feeding, talk through what you're doing and pause for your baby's response, treating it like a real conversation even before they can use real words. Respond quickly and consistently when your baby cries. Ainsworth research directly disproves the old idea that responding quickly to crying spoils a baby or makes them clingy. Her findings show the opposite. Babies whose cries are answered quickly and consistently in their first year grew up much more securely attached and later on more independent, not less. Responding now builds independence later. This doesn't mean getting it perfect every single time. It just means that the overall pattern across weeks and months is one your baby can count on. Use touch and skin-to-skin contact often. Building on the kangaroo care research, regular skin-to-skin contact, carrying your baby close, gentle massage, and simple touch during everyday care all help. They release the bonding hormone, oxytocin. They also support a healthy stress response in your baby. This isn't just for newborns. Cuddles, carrying, and closeness stay helpful well into the toddler years. Say what you think your baby is feeling. Researcher Elizabeth Mines uses the term mind-mindedness for this. It means a caregiver's habit of treating their baby as having real thoughts and feelings. For example, saying, "You're frustrated that toy won't work," instead of only describing what the baby is doing. Research links this habit in infancy to stronger attachment later on. Even with a newborn who can't understand the word yet, saying out loud what they might be feeling builds a habit that matters more as they grow. Keep daily routines predictable. Predictable routines let a baby's nervous system relax because they know what's coming next. This is the everyday, practical version of Bowlby's secure base and safe haven idea. A caregiver who shows up in the same reliable way day after day. A short, consistent goodbye routine before you leave, for example, is a small habit that helps reduce separation and anxiety over time. Take care of your own mental health. This might be the tip with the strongest research behind all 6. A baby borrows a caregiver's calm before they create their own. Researchers call this co-regulation. Depression and ongoing stress are strong risk factors for attachment problems, so getting support early from a health visitor, your GP, or a perinatal mental health service isn't separate from helping your baby's attachment. It genuinely is helping it directly. Rest, practical help from others, and your own therapy or support all count as attachment building tools, even though they don't look like baby activities at all. Your question's answered. Before we close, here's a question we hear a lot. Is it too late for my baby if they're already 1, 2, or 3 years old? The honest, research-backed answer is no. Researchers describe these patterns as fairly stable, but they can genuinely change throughout childhood. This is especially true with steady changes on how a caregiver responds. Much of the support we covered earlier has evidence for toddlers and preschoolers too, not just tiny babies. The window for building or repairing a secure attachment is much wider than a lot of parenting content online suggests. It's not a short window that closes forever. Here's another version of that question. What if I had an anxious or insecure attachment myself as a child? Am I stuck passing that on? Again, no. Researchers use the term earned secure attachment for this. It describes adults who didn't get consistent, warm care themselves as children. but through their own reflection, therapy, or a secure relationship as an adult, they go on to give their own children secure, warm care. Being able to think about your own and your baby's feelings seem to matter more than your own childhood history alone. So let's bring it all together. Secure attachment is built through steady, warm, responsive care, never through being a perfect parent. Research gives us 5 well-proven approaches: video feedback, circle of security, kangaroo care, and skin-to-skin contact, serve and return coaching, and extra support for families under strain. It also gives us 7 real causes of anxious or insecure attachment, from inconsistent responses to broken continuity of care. None of these things are about being a bad parent. All of them can improve with support and time. And it gives us 6 things you can start today: serve and return, quick and consistent responses, physical touch, naming feelings, predictable routines, and maybe most important of all, looking after your own mental health. So, if anything in this episode brought up something for you about your own childhood or about how you're parenting right now, this is a completely normal reaction to this kind of topic. It might be worth talking it through with a qualified therapist. That's exactly what this show is here for. Not to replace that kind of support, but to help you to understand the research well enough to know what questions to ask. And just to remind you, you don't have to figure this all out alone. If you want any more information from me, as I'm a qualified psychotherapist, you can email me from my website, wendycastelino.com. That's wendycastelino.com. A full list of research sources from this episode is included after this podcast and will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to Don't Get a Therapist Yet. If this episode was useful, share it with another parent, caregiver, or grandparent who might need it this week. We'll see you next time. If you're enjoying this podcast, please can you subscribe to this channel? Thank you so much.